Welcome to our webinar from our series, The Only Way Out is Through, Getting Stuff Done After Everything Subsides, a conversation with SupplyCore President Peter Provenzano. I'm Andrea Gibbs, Senior Strategy Executive for Mpowr Envision. You're all on mute, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. There's a chat box to the right, and so please put your questions in and ask them at the end of our discussion. Thought I'd introduce some my team members today. Behind the scenes, making it all happen, is my colleague, our producer, Brittany Ray, and of course, Peter Provenzano, the president of SupplyCore. Peter, welcome. I'm glad to have you join us today.
Hi, Andrea. Good to see you. Thanks for having me. Good afternoon, everyone.
It's really great to have you here, and I wanted to kind of open up today by first, before we get into some of the specifics of The Only Way Out is Through, I wanted to have you tell us a little bit about SupplyCore. What does the company do, and for whom do you do it?
Sure. SupplyCore is a small business, Department of Defense contractor primarily. We're still considered a small business, although we've grown quite a bit over the years. We're primarily a supply chain integrator, or it's also sometimes known as providing contractor logistics support. And we do that in a variety of product classes for our nation, its military, and for our allies' militaries. And we do those, we supply anything from construction materials and facility maintenance items for military bases to spare parts for end items like Humvees. So we'll manage discrete supply chain programs where we take over procurement, warehousing, and fulfillment for a broad set of commodity classes for our government and others.
Okay, and that's a global company, right?
It is. We have about 250 associates worldwide. A little more than half are in our headquarters in Rockford, and 100 or so are spread throughout the world. We have operations in South Korea and in Japan, supporting our military bases there. We have operations in the Middle East that have historically supported theater operations there and support some of our allied governments in the region. We work with Israel, we work with Saudi Arabia. We've historically worked in and for the government of Iraq, as well as our government in Iraq. And we have a number of people, associates spread really about North America, Alaska, various contracting regions where we're required to support the military bases. We have hardware stores on military bases in the southwestern U.S. So it was really important to us, to come up with ways to communicate with such a broad, diverse, spread about workforce.
Got it. And so obviously we've had a very unusual situation for the last 2.5 months with the COVID pandemic. Tell us a little bit about what SupplyCore did with regards to personal protective equipment and the state of Illinois.
Well, one of the things that we're often asked to do as we, and it's really part of our mission to support our nation and its allies in times of peace and crisis. So on a day in and day out basis, we're supporting the warfighter. When disasters historically have occurred in various regions of ours throughout the world, the government, typically the Department of Defense on behalf of FEMA, has called upon us, whether it was Hurricane Katrina or Hurricane Sandy, or more recently the devastation in Puerto Rico. We've been called upon to help restore and rebuild those regions. In Puerto Rico, we played a big role in helping to reestablish the power grid down there, and it's work we're really proud of. When this crisis that everybody's dealing with right now occurred, it was not normally we wait for that call from the Department of Defense, and we've gotten some of those calls, but the calls started coming from places that historically haven't been customers for us. And the first one came from our mayor in Rockford, Illinois, and that was followed up by requests with our state, and every crisis is very different, and This one had that same trait. It was nothing like what we did in Puerto Rico, nothing like supporting theater operations in Iraq. It was very different, and it was a very dynamic supply chain. So we were asked to help. Some of that help came from our, historical supply chain, which, numbers more than 10,000 discrete suppliers. But it also came from a number of folks that we had to really vet in real time that weren't historically in this space. It was a dynamically produced supply chain that we had to really get our arms around real rapidly, and our prior experience in doing that certainly helped us do it this time.
So you had to kind of assess some new suppliers and decide whether or not they were legitimate or the right people to be working for. I'll bet that was all brand new to you.
In some cases it was. In the class of PPE it was. When we went into the theater in Iraq, that was a whole new world too, and the government wasn't allowing you to supply your material by military convoy. So you were actually required to take your own trucks into Iraq over the road, and in most cases we hired a local tribe to provide security services, and perhaps maybe the same tribe that might have robbed us otherwise. I'm not real sure, but that's how we had to do things over there, and that wasn't something that we had ever done before. So.
Right. So with all of those sort of far-flung, not only suppliers, but bases of operation elsewhere, how do you stay in touch with all those people? How do you communicate? What tools do you use to make sure that everybody's aware of what's happening and how things are working and what's coming down the line next? Can you share any of your kind of corporate tools that you use?
Yeah, sure, of course. Thank you. I was real fortunate, nearly 20 years ago, as our business started to take off with some of these programs. We grew really fast. We earned some recognition with Inc. magazine. We made the Inc. 500 list a few times, which gave us some visibility. And I was asked to participate in a CEO peer group. And that peer group met quarterly, and candidly, I was in my 20s at the time, so it was pretty meaningful to me to be a part of something like this. And most of the businesses were as big or larger than us at that time, and some templates were brought forth to the group to use, namely goal maps and X-rays and decision blueprints and a variety of tools like that. And every quarter we'd gather, and you'd have to have your quarterly X-ray done. And I remember cramming like a college kid, for a couple of weeks every quarter beforehand. And I was like, gosh, this is all being worked by, all these folks in our business. And wouldn't it be so much better than me just kind of doing this in isolation, other than the phone calls to everybody? Hey, what's the status? Hey, what's the status? I'm, kind of dusting off the strategy from, that I haven't really looked at since the last quarter. There's got to be a better way of doing this. So we built our first web-based strategy development and execution tool, I guess in response to me wanting to be a little more lazy. I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. But
no,
that work was already really
efficient, Peter. Efficient, efficient, not lazy. Efficient.
That work was already being done somewhere in the organization, and I just really envisioned a really two-way communication pathway between executive leadership team and the associates that were engaged. And so we developed our first tool in the early 2000s, web-based, scalable, and we continued to sort of evolve that till we really broke it, and it was pretty outdated technology that we had built it on, and we rebuilt that in the form of Mpowr and Envision. And now it's something we use, and it's something we're also offering commercially to other organizations.
And are you able to see how it sounds like you're able to track progress and people know what other people are doing, and it kind of all happens real time?
It does. You start with your vision, mission, and values, just like any other effort, but it provides you the ability to sort of create an outline of your strategy map, to identify the key drivers that are moving your organization forward. If you focused on nothing else and you got these 6 or 9 things right, and how those drivers might link into that strategy map, or how the milestones that you've identified that you need to hit year over year to achieve that multi-year objective that is your sort of end state of that plan. If your plan has an end date, you can break that down in the milestones and link those milestones to various efforts in the plan and really see how year over year you're going to work your way to that ultimate set of numbers.
Got it. So as you made this shift and pivot to, fill the needs of the state of Illinois and other agencies for PPE, now going forward, as we come out of this, what will you change as a result in your processes with your tools that you just described? What will you change? Will anything stay the same? How will you come out of this particular situation and move forward kind of thinking, wow, I think there's something new we can do here?
Well, I mean, a few things I think always remain the same. We want to be able to work on the business and in the business simultaneously, and Mpowr Envision really allows us to do both of those things. We want to be able to do, and this was really the foundation of why we built the tool. We want to be able to do multiple, and in order to be the best, we've got to be able to do multiple dissimilar activities simultaneously to a high level through others. There's just simply too much to do, and we want to be able to communicate about that in real time and how we're doing. And we're still going to do those things. We've worked with numerous organizations and governments over the years, and we've had folks say to us, well, we don't have any time to plan like that. We're always in crisis. Well, if you don't have a plan that you're working, or if you have a plan that you threw on the shelf and you're not working, guess where you're likely to remain? In that sense of a state of crisis all the time, whether real or perceived. I mean, right now it's very, very real. Sometimes it might be self-induced. So the best way to work through a crisis, to come out of a crisis, is through developing and executing a plan and adjusting it in real time as well. So those things. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Please.
I was going to say that one of the things that I've heard you talk about before too is the value of postmortems. Can you tell us a little bit about how you work that within your organization?
Absolutely. So the plan really becomes what's known in military speak as commander's intent. Charge that hill, right? And then once you're charging that hill, all hell breaks loose. And the intent is still to get to the top of that hill, but the actual plan that might have been laid out might become a little more like sausage making at that point in time. And so one of the ways to make sense of the sausage making process is, as you were getting through efforts, whether you achieved or missed the objective of that effort, is to do what the government calls after action reviews, or what we call a post-mortem, and have that post-mortem in turn inform the plan going forward. We think that's a vital step in the process. It's not a coded step in our process, but it's a human interaction step that we take, that we work into the content that's in our strategy map in Envision.
Mm-hmm. And it allows you to maybe see where you could make some future, achieve some future efficiencies. I know
Absolutely.
that.
We don't want to make the same mistakes twice. I think one of the biggest challenges that I've recognized in business are the blind spots along the way. Sometimes they have, we've heard, used to hear Secretary Rumsfeld talk about known knowns and known unknowns, and oftentimes a blind spot is maybe it could have been a known known or a known unknown, but we want to reduce the number of blind spots. Things like COVID, there's always going to be things that come up that we could not have predicted. But there are things that we want to also get better at predicting, and I think after action reviews play a role in that.
Word in the grapevine is you had at one point the VP of operations riding around in the semi trying to get the
Right.
PPA
Well, that
equipment
would be
back to us.
something that we would want to avoid next time as well. But no, that's just that's that charging that hill part, I guess, right? I mean, it was
Yep.
what we had to do at that point to get the job done. We had a big order that was of masks for the state of Illinois, and there were lots of changing regulations along the way, and we're just trying to do everything we could to make sure that that shipment got here in a timely manner and got to the state in a, as soon as possible. And um, all of a sudden, our vice president of programs was in a semi and in the bowels of O'Hare, probably places he wasn't supposed to be, but we got the job done. So
And ultimately, that's what you have to do to get the job done, which is good.
absolutely.
So some of the tools that Peter's been talking about, our software platform, Mpowr Envision, is basically the tool that was developed internally at SupplyCore. SupplyCore was its own first customer, and currently we use it now, as does SupplyCore, to be able to make those kinds of communications across departments, across different areas, across different companies happen, across different divisions happen, so that everybody knows in real time what's happening. And this particular strategy platform, currently we've been using it to help other people make not only the transition during this COVID situation, but also afterwards, because as Peter said, you've got to be paying attention to the strategy you're going to have as you come out of this situation and come back into a more, quote, normalized situation. And so we're offering the first 3 months of the strategy software for free. And we also have a strategy consultation. I have talked to several people already about how they can make a transition from shelter in place to coming back into the workplace, and what are the things that will change and what are the things that will remain the same. And we also have some resources on our website at mpowr.com. We've got some blogs that deal with the very situations that we're talking about today. And we've also got some templates for doing strategic planning and walking yourself through your organized strategic plan for getting back into the environment. So I wanted to make everybody aware that was on the call of those particular offers. And then I wanted to open up, because we've got a fair amount of people on the webinar, and I wanted to open that up. Hopefully you've been able to put your questions to the side. And I'm going to turn this back to our producer, Brittany, so that people out there can ask Peter questions about coming back in, getting stuff done, and emerging out of the pandemic. Brittany?
Yes, we'll still leave it open for people to put their questions in now, but we do have one that came through. How should people prepare for coming back after this crisis?
Thanks, Brittany. I think you want to use tools like we have here. I think you want to develop a strategy, enable that strategy to be interactive, to have some kind of two-way communication. We often talk about how strategies are often just dusty binders. Not everybody may utilize the capabilities of our tool or others in the same way. There's our functionality includes real-time progress notes, that go out to all the participants in the organization. So progress notes are entered at, various thresholds in the strategic plan, down to the plan and action level, and even up at drivers and milestones. And it really enables managers and leaders to really get passively informed about what's happening in real time. The kind of content that comes into me on a weekly basis in the form of progress notes, which are delivered either via email, or we have integration today with Slack, and we're working on integration with other tools that organizations use. You're just able to really see and respond to that feedback that you're getting in the form of progress notes real quickly. I myself, I look at our dashboard, I see the red, I want to go into the red. I want to look at the details of the red. I want to look at the relationships between drivers and the work that's being done. Others might want to look at the metrics relative to their plans and actions, and leaders may be looking at a higher level. So there's a role for everybody in a strategic plan, and our software accommodates that.
Thank you so much, Peter. We did have a technical question just come through. If the Slack integration is free with the Slack plan.
We haven't had, that's something I would have to look into, or maybe Andrea can answer, but as far as I know, we might be the only customer right now utilizing our Slack integration. So I don't know how we offer it to others. Andrea.
It's part of the plan, yes. So it automatically integrates with several different platforms, Slack being one of them. So that comes when you order the software.
Okay.
So that is,
good question.
the answer is yes. Yeah, very good question.
Now I know too.
Peter, what are some of the more, if you had to summarize, what are some of the more valuable things that you've learned during this pandemic time? What sticks in your head when you think about, wow, that was a good lesson we learned, and we're going to take that knowledge and move forward with it?
I would say it's lessons we continue to learn and relearn. You've got to be able to adapt and change to the external circumstances really, really quickly. I think we've seen a lot of remarkable organizations, throughout our country and the world that have evolved very rapidly. You see local 3D printing operations, shifting gears, and all of a sudden making shields, as an example. There's a lot of folks mobilizing in a real, wartime, really not since World War II wartime style effort to reinvent what they do, at least if not only for a period of time. So for us, it's really being able to pivot on a dime and without losing sight of really our original intended trajectory. So it's being able to really do both.
So it's keeping sight of your mission and your vision, but also realizing that you have to be open to external stimuli and make sure you're ready when a blind spot hits.
That's right. Respond.
Right. And with a solid strategy, you can do that. Brittany, other questions out there?
Yeah, absolutely. Peter, how did you get into the SupplyCore business? A good one.
Well, it was a business actually that my family started. My father and mother were employee number 1 and 2 in the late 80s. I got back from college in the early mid 90s and started at SupplyCore's predecessor, Pro Technical Products, in 1996. And it was a real, during this COVID crisis, I've been actually going back through and looking at a lot of old files, and I've found strategic plans from like 1998 and whatnot, and all just real paper driven kinds of things. But it's nice that I actually saved all of that. And it was just pretty wild to see how our process of doing strategic planning has really evolved over the years. But that's how I got into it. It was a challenging time in our organization, because what Pro Technical Products did, what my parents did, was really bid on a lot of discrete little solicitations that came out from the government request for quotes for a particular item. And when I came back to the business, that work was going away, and the Department of Defense was starting to go to really larger prime contractors and contracting with fewer companies, and really what they called sort of bundling all of these supplies into a bigger solicitation. We were one of the few small businesses that made the leap from that transactional work that mom and dad were doing to the program work that we do today.
So a shift and pivot in the business, basically.
Definitely.
Very good. Brittany, any other questions for us out there?
Yeah, wonderful. We do have another customer that commented they use the Slack integration as well. So that's great to hear. We do have another question too. How are you keeping employees motivated at this time?
Ooh, great question.
Well, we've certainly, I think, had the same flexibility that really every organization has had to have, in terms of that has, stayed open. Our associates, for the most part, are all working from home. If there were any, shortages in terms of equipment that were needed at their house, we took care of that very quickly. And, we have candidly, we kind of got a group of adrenaline junkies that, are pretty motivated regardless, whether the work's at the office or at home or really on the road. They thrive on getting the work done, and the work is never, I mean, there's a steady state to our work, but then there are these surges, these surprises of crises that appear that really force our associates to have to make a bigger push. And they know we're not babysitters. That everybody's a grown up, and we want everybody to catch their breath when they it's all about balance, and we promote that really as an organization.
Wonderful. Another question here that came through. What strategic suggestions do you have for a startup in post-COVID-19 environment?
Ooh,
What
that's a good question.
suggestion do I have for a startup in a post-COVID?
To have for startup in post-COVID-19 environment. Great question.
Well, hopefully, if it was something that somebody was thinking about prior, or even if it's something new that's been thought of while you've been sitting at home, dealing with this crisis, the relevance of your plan, to, show how you're, to be able to develop a go-to-market strategy to identify the need and the channels, that can get you there, the resources that are required, and to back into, from a multi-year objective, and to be able to break that down into annual, quarterly, monthly, so you can somehow, keep pace, keep a sense as to whether or not you're progressing. I think that's very, very critical. If you need to raise money, you're going to be able to break it down that way to prospective investors. So think about the things that bankers or prospective investors would want to see from you. That would be important. Andrea, you have any other advice?
I think that's a good way to put it, Peter. I think basically you set out your goal and where you want to go, and then you break it down into, you eat the elephant one bite at a time, to use a tired expression, right. But it's very true. And I think you certainly have the perspective of being able to do something like that, as you've done it with the different businesses that are under the SupplyCore banner. So I think that's a great way to look at it. Other questions?
We have some questions coming through. Do you think your planning and execution tool will help others be more successful?
I do. I'm certain of it. I think if an organization and individuals are dedicated to steady work of a strategic plan, the two-way communication, the updating, the adjusting, the monitoring, it's harder to get off track. It's harder to get stuck not doing maybe the 3 most important things that you should have been doing that quarter related to your plan, that really ought to account for 50% of your time. I mean, that was one of the ways that we would break this down, in terms of, we would take our plan and our work in the plan, my work in the plan. I'm going to do these 3 things this quarter. This is what the plan says that I'm supposed to be doing. And that's going to be 50% of my time. What often happens in an organization is we just get caught up in the present, caught up in this pile of paper and that pile of paper, and we can, without going back to that plan on a regular basis, if it's just sitting somewhere up on a shelf, we might recognize maybe after 3 or 4 months when we pull that down, oh my gosh, I said I was going to do this 4 months ago. Darn, I didn't do that.
Yeah.
Harder to get off track with Envision that way.
Yeah. What gets watched gets measured, and what
Right.
gets measured happens.
That's right.
And really what you're talking about too, which I think is very, very critical, is your plan becomes what you do on a daily basis. It isn't just something lofty that you, as you say, put on a shelf. It's something that you live every day, and you remind your team that you're living it every day. I think that makes a huge difference.
We like to say our Mpowr Envision goes from the strategic to the strategically tactical. You know, you're not necessarily going to have your non-strategic tactical work in here. There will always be aspects of everybody's job, substantial aspects of everybody's job that really fall outside of a strategy tool. But it's making sure that these things stay on the plate too.
Excellent.
We have a really good question. Can you give a real life example of how you implement critical success factors and KPIs into a strategic plan?
Sure. So, you know, we really, for us, in Mpowr Envision, we're able to, you know, create our strategy map, which has a tremendous amount of content. You know, break our strategy down into some kind of an outline form that makes sense to us. I think every organization needs to be able to do that. You know, really think categorically about structuring strategy that way. But then to be able to take a step back, either at the beginning or at the end, depending on your process, and say, okay, now we have all of this, and we're probably not going to get it all done. We're probably not going to succeed at everything, but are there certain things that if we do nothing else and get these right, we're going to be successful? So, and that's really where our drivers come from. Maybe others might call critical success factors. If we do nothing else, if we get nothing else done successfully, and we get these done right, we're going to be okay. And you know, we like to keep that to a manageable number of 6 to 9, 6 to 10 items, and then we, you know, typically work to show the linkages between drivers and the work in the strategic plan, the plans and actions that are in the strategy map under those, in that outline format, under headers that may or may not have anything to do with this driver, and how multiple things in various areas of that map actually relate back to the same driver. So it gives us a view really into the strategy map without having to, you know, kind of go, you know, scrolling through everything to find what's important to drivers, as an example. We can do the same with milestones, link it to a variety of areas to show relationship between, you know, yeah, we've got this structure over here, this very, you know, sort of linear structure in the strategy map, but then you know, relative to drivers and milestones, we can show those relationships, and that's really important to us.
Excellent.
Anything to
Question.
add, Andre?
I think, you know, the way I used to think about critical success factors and tying it to your strategy is it's a way to cross-reference what's most important to you, because
Right.
so many different things, as you said, so many different things you do across different functions will apply to one critical success factor, or as you call them, drivers. And so how do you keep track of all those things when they, quote, live in so many different places? The way you do that is you attach them all to your critical success factor or your driver, and then you can monitor the health of that.
That's right.
So yeah, absolutely. That's I call it the cross-referencing of your strategic plan. So
Well said. And that reminds me, you know, whatever terminology you use, you can change the titles of the headers in Mpowr and Envision to match whether it's drivers or critical success factors. Your organization's way of speaking can be incorporated into our software.
yeah, so language is important, as we know, when we do this kind of thing. So anything else for us, Brittany?
That it looks like all 4 right now. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Brittany, for producing this.
Thank you,
Peter,
Britt.
thank you so much for being a part of this this conversation. It's been great to talk to you. Please stay
Likewise.
well and healthy.
Talk soon. You
Okay.
bet.
All right. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Have a good day.